And President Trump announcing an historic peace deal with Iran on Truth Social, saying this new action will bring peace and security to the whole region. The deal is said to include traffic resuming in the Strait of Hormuz, the end of the U.S. blockade there, negotiations for Iran's nuclear enrichment and disposal of enriched uranium, sanctions relief, the release of frozen assets, and a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. But all of that not happening in that order. President Trump says oil will drop fast once the strait is officially open. Some lingering doubts from the shipping industry over how soon prices will come down. Kepler is saying that they estimate around 500 large commercial vessels are currently in the Gulf. Vessels that have been delayed or held back would need time to exit, complete their voyages, and potentially return for new loadings. That process could take roughly 2 to 3 months, but they do note that traffic in the strait is sharply higher than it has been over the last 24 hours. Immediate reaction. And joining me now for his immediate reaction is Wisconsin Congressman Derrick Van Orden. Congressman, welcome. Thank you for joining us. You are a member of the House Armed Services Committee, and you served in the Navy for 26 years. Thank you. I want to know what you make of this deal and if you think Israel is the potential spoiler.
I think it's fantastic. We're closer to long-term peace in the Middle East than we've been in a very, very long period of time, and it's solely due to Donald Trump's efforts, period. It's fantastic. Listen, the commodities market and oil operates a lot on emotion, and the shipping insurance market is so convoluted that the folks that own these vessels have to be incredibly cautious. So with this deal, we'll see the straits being opened, no tolls being charged for the vessels transiting the Straits of Hormuz, meaning that these crude oil prices are going to drop precipitously. But most importantly, Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. This incredibly dangerous, radical, Muslim mullah-controlled regime of Iran is responsible for the deaths of thousands of American citizens, including many of my friends. I served in not just in the Navy, but I love the Navy, but I was a Navy SEAL for an extended period of time, over 20 years. And these folks must never have a nuclear weapon. Imagine if Iran had a nuclear weapon now, what they could do to control the straits. So what the president has done is ordered Pete Hegseth to make sure that they get rid of the conventional aspect of the Iranian military, which they have done, and we're making sure that they do not have a nuclear weapon, or they would continue to hold the world hostage economically.
Congressman, let me ask you this. The president, when this all started, proposed the idea of the Iranian people taking over their country. But in an interview yesterday with the New York Times, he described the Ayatollah Mujtaba Khomeini as a pragmatist. What do you make of that?
Well, listen, regime change and nation building doesn't work. I was in every conflict from the first Gulf War up until Syria. And every time the United States government, through the military, tries to go into a nation and dictate to them how they're going to run their country, it simply does not work. So making sure that we can help potentially set conditions for the Iranian people to rise up, that's something we can do. But if we go in and say, you know, we are going to put American-led people into the Iranian regime for them to take over, it simply won't work. What Donald Trump has done is what no president in living history has done, and that's learned from history itself. So he understands that the Iranian people have to determine their own form of government and how they are going to govern themselves.
The state of FISA is up in the air after the Surveillance Act expired on Friday. Both chambers of Congress failing to pass an extension, but this was for the first time since FISA's inception. This is happening as World Cup matches begin across the country. They're expected to draw in more than 5 million foreign visitors. And many in Congress are raising the alarm that this lapse in surveillance threatens the country's safety. Of course, this is ahead of America's 250th celebration kicking off. I mean, Congressman, what is your take on FISA lapsing?
Well, so this FISA is not what it used to be. It needed massive reform. We passed the RISA Act, and then with this version of FISA, there's over 60 meaningful reforms to FISA itself, including criminalizing abuse of the system. And it's verbatim. If you abuse this system, you go to prison. And that's what I want to see. with those rogue FBI agents, and that's what my constituents want to see. We cannot weaponize the United States government. And so this version of FISA, as I said, had over 60 very meaningful reforms to make sure if it's abused, the people that were abusing it go to prison. So, in fact, this is rather dangerous to not have access to this. And remember, people are talking about having subpoenas to spy on American citizens. That is pre-existing, and it's solidified and strengthened in this version of FISA. Listen, I do not want the United States government spying on American citizens, period, nor do my constituents. And this version of FISA made sure that that would not happen. And so we do need to be very cautious. I would encourage my Republican colleagues and my Democrat colleagues to actually read the legislation and understand the over 60 meaningful reforms that were put into FISA, mostly through the RISA Act, which they voted for already.
Congressman Liz Peek, a panelist, has a question for you.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm glad to hear you say that, because no one else has been talking about the reforms that have been put in this FISA bill. But isn't it the case that Democrats we're having a hissy fit about Bill Pulte being made head DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, and now that Jay Clayton has been nominated for that post? Isn't this likely just to happen? I mean, isn't that sort of removing the main obstacle?
Yeah, Liz, well, do me a favor. Don't tell anybody that I actually do all of my homework and I read every piece of legislation that I vote on.
I mean, that's so unusual. It's so great.
A little bit more of that in D.C. It's refreshing, isn't it? Hey, listen, right now the Democrats have proven that they are going to put national security underneath their political wants and needs. Let's remember this. Over 100 Democrats voted to not deport criminal illegal aliens that were convicted of raping and murdering American citizens. You can't circle that square or square that circle. You just can't do it. So the Democrat Party right now is not John F. Kennedy's Democrat Party. 100% no. They're willing to put politics and the lust for raw political power over the national security, and I'm simply unwilling to do that.
Thank you. Congressman Derrick Van Orden, we appreciate the time. And coming up,
You're welcome.
President Trump on his way to the G7 summit in France right now after announcing this historic peace deal with Iran.